This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
Your body is more of a temple than you thought. In fact, it is a sophisticated telecommunications system based on Hebrew letters that function like a combination lock to regulate every bodily activity according to biblical themes. Dr. Alfonso Manzo explains how it all works, because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Shabbat Shalom to our fans. It's Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Tonight we get into the nitty-gritty about the Aleph Tav body system with Dr. Alfonso Manzo. This is an ancient system of points on the body, kind of like acupressure or acupuncture, but it's light touch. That's all that's needed. Plus, each point on the body correlates with a Hebrew letter, and each Hebrew letter has a theme to it that relates to the healing specific parts of the body, to healing specific parts of the body. So the crazy part is this is not a theory. It actually works. And some people even believe that Yeshua used this system to heal people when he laid hands on them. Makes sense. All right, time to bring on our co-hosts for tonight, Angie Clark and Michael Rood. Welcome.
Thanks, God. Good to be here.
Good to have you here, sir. All right, well, Angie has something she wants to share about the body in particular.
Yes, I mean, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So I had to have an EKG, and I literally got to see the beating of my heart. It was profound. It gave me a whole new respect for this machine that our Creator has allowed us to be in. And I just was putting two and two together, and I'm like, even the rocks cry out, the chief cornerstone. Our heart is like the chief cornerstone that represents Yeshua. And I mean, it all fit together just from that EKG. I was just so impressed.
Oh, well, and tonight we're talking about the temple of the Holy Spirit, the Bible. So yeah, that's why you wanted to talk about this, because we're talking about the temple.
Yes.
Wow, that is really cool.
The chief cornerstone in the temple, the chief cornerstone in our bodies.
Yes, that is that's a common joke with the First Nations people up in Canada. They say, that Yeshua was a native person, they say. And they tell us to white people, and the white people fall for it. And we say, why? What do you mean? They says, because he was chief cornerstone. So, it's a great joke. It's a great joke among Messianics of the native tribes up in Canada. So good. I love it. I just love it. Anyway, okay. So we have a few minutes to talk about the love gift this month. There's only about another half month to get this. If you are liking what Dr. Manzo is talking about on these episodes, you're going to want to get the love gift, because this shows you how to do it. He and I stood on this stage, and he showed me how to do all of this stuff. It's how to heal with your bare hands. Let me just give you a little bit of a yeah, it's crazy. When Yeshua laid hands on people, like we talked about tonight, what exactly was he doing? Could it be that he was employing an ancient healing practice that has been long since forgotten? We're talking about since Moses. I mean, this is a long time ago. And what if you could do the same thing today to stop a heart attack, bleeding, an allergic reaction, or even choking? And Dr. Manzo showed me how to do this. So if someone's bleeding on the side of the road, you come upon an accident, and you want to stop the bleeding, what's the natural human reaction?
Pressure.
Just put pressure on it, right? Well, what did I just do? I took my right hand and put it down, and put my left hand on top. And he says it could be the pressure stopping the bleeding, but electrically, what that does is that stops bleeding in the body. And he'll explain it, you'll see what I mean. And actually to draw out a splinter, which he has done himself. He got a splinter on a beach one time, and he decided to try this himself. You do the opposite. So right hand down, left hand on top will stop bleeding. The other way around releases things from the body. So basically to have a splinter come out, and you don't even have to touch right on the spot. You can be right around where the splinter is, like say it was right here, or right here rather. Well, on my body it's hard to do, but it's like you have a splinter right there in your shoulder, which is really weird. But there would be left hand down, right hand, and you just don't have to put pressure, you just hold for 5 minutes. And he said that he saw the splinter head just sort of come out, and he just pulled it out.
Amazing.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and stopping heart attacks, choking, that was one that got me, like an emergency like choking. I mean, you'd hope that you could remember what the combination was to do that, but you can literally do that. And so That's what this teaching all is about. We have some other gifts as well. We just really appreciate what you give to this ministry. Michael has always said, if you're going to give to this ministry, let's give something back, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We appreciate that.
We really do. And we have a little note of thanks actually on the back of this piece of the Love Gift this month, which is the level of $300 or more, if you can get all these things. And we have a verse from Isaiah on here and the Rood Awakening logo. It's a great little thing. Anyway, we're going to let the commercial do the rest of the talking. Of course, these things are available after Shabbat. We don't want you to get these on Shabbat. Our stores closed online anyway on Shabbat. You can't get it on Shabbat. But thank you for supporting us after Shabbat. We really appreciate it, and we just like to give you these things in return. So thank you for that. All right, did you know that your body is a sophisticated telecommunication system based on Hebrew letters that function like a combination lock, that regulate every bodily activity according to biblical themes? Yes, it is that tied together. Dr. Alfonso Manzo explains how it all works. Stay with us.
Some of the traditions in modern-day Judaism are what Yeshua said are takanot, laws which change biblical law, which are forbidden, and Yeshua said don't do them. But other traditions are remembrances of good things in the past, and they are a shadow picture of good things to happen in the future. On the Sabbath, we take 2 challah loaves, 2 loaves of bread. This represents the manna, the double portion that we received on the 6th day. This was God's provision for us. And this is what it continues to mean to us today. When Yeshua, just before his crucifixion, the night before his crucifixion, at the Last Supper that he had with his disciples, he took bread and he blessed, not the bread, he blessed the Most High. And he said, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And he broke the bread and he said, this is my body, which is broken for you. As often as you do this, remember this. By his stripes, we were healed. And then he took the cup and he said, in the prayer of Melchizedek to Abraham, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And Yeshua said, this, what you have been doing for 1,000 years from the time of Abraham, this represents the renewed covenant in my blood. This is how I will pay for the broken covenant. I will pay the death penalty and do this until I come.
The tabernacle in the wilderness had several pieces inside it, one of which being the Ark of the Covenant. And of course, many people have tried to figure out if this was some kind of ancient battery or did it have power of its own. And well, you look at that and then you look at our own bodies, which are the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? So within our temple, is there a bioenergetic system of some kind? Does it have anything to do with Hebrew? Yes, it does, and yes, it does. So we're going to find more about that from Dr. Alfonso Manzo. Welcome, Dr. Manzo.
Thank you to have.
We've had you for the last couple of weeks explaining sort of the background of the what you call the Aleph Tav body system, and you've created a book, which, by the way, people can get at the bottom of the screen right there. That's where you can get this. If you're watching this on Shabbat, of course, wait till after Shabbat, right? Okay. And this is a wonderful, you've called it not a book, it's a textbook, which I would agree.
Yes.
And during the break, you were showing some folks here in the studio how to use this. And it's basically touching different parts of your body in different sequences and for different time periods to address a lot of things.
Yes.
And so today we're going to get into more about this bioenergetic temple. Is this something to be embraced, or is it something like Kabbalah? Is it acupressure? Is it acupuncture? All these things, like how do we define this thing?
Yes.
So with that, I'm going to let you take it away because you have a very good explanation of this.
Yes, so in the first one, we talked about bioenergy.
Yeah.
The second one, we talked about biophysics. So now we're getting to putting all this together and talking about the temple, the body. as an electromagnetic system. And so there are some more questions we need to answer again with this. So again, we start off with the brief definition of what the Aleph-Tau body system is. So the Aleph-Tau body system is a Hebrew electromagnetic telecommunication system of the human body. This system is made up of the basic building blocks of creation, the Hebrew letters, which control all of the information for proper function, shape, form, and animation of the human body. So the letters control the system, and then the system controls everything else. And it is really a laying on of hands. So we have on the screen there the Mark 16:18. Lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. Well, how does all this work? Well, it turns out that there is a Hebrew bioenergetic temple that's made up of the Hebrew letters. But you're going to see that not only is the language of Yah written on the body, but a lot of representation that you find in the temple is also symbolically in these energy systems. So we're going to go through that here. And so first thing, a creationist understanding of Yah's design of the human body from a Hebrew perspective. So we've read this a couple times now in this series. Genesis 1, in the beginning, Elohim created. Everyone knows the passage. But let's think about this idea of he created the universe. What is universe, right? And it means single spoken sentence. Okay, single spoken sentence. Well, who spoke? Well, we know, Yah. Now we have to ask the question, what did he speak? Well, a lot of people, like yourself and myself, believe it was Hebrew. And we believe Hebrew was the original language until we got to the Tower of Babel.
Definitely, I can go for that.
Everything got confused. And we have other people who have talked about these similar concepts, like Brad Scott. And one of his, I think it's called In My Flesh, I See God. And Brad reveals how the design of the Hebrew language is found embedded in all of God's creation. He discusses how the structure of the Word of God is found in agriculture and written on our DNA. So he talks about agrobiology, linguistics, 2 and 3 letter roots, life in the cell, chromosomes, atoms. So when you start looking at all this together, then you ask another deeper question. Well, if this is true, that Yah's language is being found everywhere in creation, shouldn't we find it on the body more? Is it only in the DNA? Or is it actually more places on the body that it's found? And we're going to find out that there's a lot more places, just the DNA, that we find the language.
That would make sense to me because, I was always of the opinion that since Yahweh created us last, we are the culmination of all creation. Because everything you see in nature, there's a type or a foreshadowing of what's in the body. Like just for example, the trees. What do the trees do for the earth? They provide oxygen. Well, trees, or our lungs under a microscope look like trees.
Yeah.
They do the same thing for the body. And there are many, many things in the body like that. You get right down to even just predators in the body, or predators in the world, like sharks and things like that. Well, they're kind of like our killer T cells in the body. And you can correlate almost anything in nature to the human body. So this doesn't surprise me that there's a lot more to the human body than we give it credit for.
Even the composition. And you look at it, and that's why we're getting into this bioenergetic temple. Because it's like, how does a lump of clay move and walk? What animating is this? Is it just the spirit, or is it the spirit working in tandem with something electromagnetic that animates the body and allows it to do all this stuff? So that's what we're going to talk about, how the body really is a temple. And there's an electromagnetic structure and a physical structure, and then the spirit is housed in that structure. So when we look at the basic building blocks of all creation, we have the Hebrew letters on the screen. So the Hebrew is the building blocks of creation, and not only is it an agricultural biology, mathematic language, but it's also a language of numbers. And numbers and energy are basically similar. And numbers basically are the measurement of energy in the electromagnetic spectrum. So we number things like in frequency and volts and current and wavelength. All of these things are measured and then numbered. What are we measuring? Well, we're measuring some form of energy. Well, Hebrew letters also have numerical value, and that's very interesting. Because we shouldn't think of Hebrew as a language like English where it's been numbered. We don't go A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, but Hebrew letters literally have numerical values to them, and they're not necessarily in the order that we think of.
So this is the gematria.
Yeah. You have like 1 through 10, and then you have 90 through, or 10 through 90, and then you have 100 through 900. So you have these ones, tens, hundreds, and this cyclical pattern that just keeps going around when you look at the Hebrew language. And then the first thing people really ask is, well, what is Aleph Tau Badi? We kind of explained, but what is it not? Well, it's not Kabbalah, it's not mysticism, it's not New Age, it's not the occult. HaSatan didn't create anything. This is a system that Yah created and put on the body, and we just never really knew about it before. So it's new to a lot of people. It's not actually new, it's been around since the beginning. But it's new to us, so we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh, okay, well, you know, just because Satan has some counterfeits over there, we have to run away from anything that looks like it.
Yeah, so the counterfeit obviously had an original, and this is the original.
And this is the original. So this is what we're going to look at. What you're seeing on the slide right now is the overview of today's presentation. We're going to look at the proof that energy systems actually do exist on the body. We're going to look at the different parts of what makes up the Aleph Tau Badi system. And then we're going to look at how the Aleph Tau Badi system is a telecommunication system, how it relates to scripture, and when you put that all together, how it's a Hebrew electromagnetic temple. And then we're going to give some examples of some Hebrew letters at the very end of this. So here's the first guy we need to talk about. His name is Dr. Voll, Dr. Reinhold Voll. And this was the first German scientist, he was a medical doctor, who actually proved acupuncture points existed on the body. And what he started doing is he was using a very basic like ohm meter that you would use in electrical engineering, and he was measuring resistance at acupuncture points and then non-points. And he found something really interesting. Every time he tested an acupuncture point, it had, what was it, 15 times more, or no, 100 times more resistance than a non-acupuncture point. And he went, well, this is interesting. There's definitely something here at these points. And then he teamed up with another French doctor. And by the way, Dr. Voll, you can see on the slide here, he did this over 60 years ago. I think now, giving time frame, maybe it's more like 70, 80 years. So this was done a long time ago. He also noticed that there was some type of energetic change in the points when people touched things. So he had a bunch of supplements on his shelves. And when he was measuring points on people, people would reach over and grab a supplement, and the measurement would change. And he realized that when people were touching things, there's an interaction with the electromagnetic field of a substance in your body. And he could then figure out how to balance different points on the body by the person touching supplements and seeing which one would put the points back into a balanced range.
So this is where we get, oh gosh, I lost the term for it.
Muscle testing?
Muscle testing, thank you, yes, muscle testing, or kinesiology.
Yep.
As it's also known.
The very beginnings of this was kind of his work, because then people kind of got the idea, oh, let's put the supplement in your hand and see how your muscles test, if
right,
they're weak or strong. Or so
wow.
he teamed up with this French doctor, Jean Claude, and they did another really interesting experiment with radioactive isotopes, where they actually injected radioactive isotopes into acupuncture points, non-points.
Okay.
And of course, if anyone needs to know out there, the radioactive isotopes is where usually they make you drink the stuff that tastes like chalk, and then since it's radioactive, they can watch it travel through your body, so they can see, okay, how's the digestive system working? Is it getting through the system or not? But in this instance, if you look in the screen, you can see on the top there is where they injected the radioactive isotopes into a non-acupuncture point. And it just made a dot and it dissipated. It didn't go anywhere. But the bottom picture there on the right is when they injected it into a acupuncture point, it actually started traveling across these pathways, what they call meridians in Chinese medicine. And they found out that these drawings that the Chinese had were about 90% accurate after testing out all the different points. And sure enough, there are these pathways they drew out on the body, and we can see it with radioactive isotopes.
So and the ancient Chinese did not have radioactive isotope technology.
No,
they just knew
amazing.
this.
They were this accurate, and you know how many people were being taught about this, though. And we're talking research that was done almost 80, maybe 90 years ago. And I bet your medical doctor's never heard of this. They're just going to say, oh, acupuncture points don't exist.
Right.
Right. Or it's voodoo, or it's nonsense, or it's new age. But it's like, well, we can actually measure them electrically and with radioactive isotopes, so they exist. So the question is, where did they come from? You know, did Satan sneak in and put these on our body to deceive us? Or did Yah actually create these and we just haven't been told the truth about what they are?
Right.
Right?
The fact that he revealed something to the ancient Chinese first, well, good for them.
That's right.
We can learn from them and use modern technology to prove it.
And I actually think the original story is the original acupuncture point, I think it was a lung point, was discovered by a Chinese general because he had asthma. And at war, he got hit with an arrow, and the arrow hit a lung point. And after they got the arrow out of him, his asthma was gone.
Oh, wow.
So they're like, well, that's interesting. So they started rounding up people that had similar problems and hitting them in that same point. And their problems started going away. And that's how they discovered the first acupuncture point, actually. And so a lot of acupuncture actually comes out of the martial arts over there, because when people had different problems, they would start hitting and striking different places on the body until the problem would go away, and then they realize, oh, that's another point.
Oh, really? Wow.
And that's how they started documenting it.
Huh.
So empirical studies.
So through hitting each other and throwing arrows at each other, we learned about acupressure or acupuncture.
So now what one's more crazy?
Yeah.
Getting shot with an arrow or letting something inject you with radioactive isotope?
Yeah.
I don't know. Now on the screen is another picture. This is actually the skin. Your skin is called the dermis. So you have the epidermis, which is the superficial layer of the skin, and then dermis is the deep layer. So there's two layers. And right there where all the arrows are pointing is kind of the center of an electrical point on the body. And what's interesting is right when you get to an electrical point on the body, you have these dermal papillae, they call, and they stick out a lot further to the skin, and they're wider, and there's a lot of them surrounding each other. And they have all of these nerve wrappings in them. So there's something very electrical about that area. Where if you look at more at the bottom of the slide, you start seeing how the papillae get smaller and smaller, and then they start fading off. So usually when you get an area of the skin, because this is 100 magnification, a normal area of the skin where there's not an acupuncture point, you're gonna see these papillae are very, very small and very isolated. They're not sticking out as much, they're not as thick, and there's not so many of them clustered together. So that is anatomical proof that there's something unique and different at energy centers on the body. So it's not just woo-woo. So that's basically it on the science of how they started measuring acupuncture points. And then different cultures discovered different systems. So that's traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncture. But the system we're talking about is a completely different one. And what we're going to be talking about are not acupuncture points, but they still have the similar you could say, correlations. Like you're still going to see the same thing at the surface of the skin. They're still going to have an electrical measurement you can see, but they're not classified as an acupuncture point.
Do they follow the same meridians as?
They do not.
They do not. Oh.
They're actually, the pathways are completely different. The pathways in the Aleph-Tah body system are actually much more thorough, and they cross the midline. So like in acupuncture, if you have, let's say they call it the lung meridian. You know, it's gonna start in your fingers, or I think it starts in the thumb. I'm kind of out of touch with all my acupuncture training, but let's say large intestine. I know that one. Large intestine begins in your index finger. It is the thumb, and then it comes all the way up the arm, and maybe it comes down a little bit, and that's acupuncture. It never crosses the midline. But when you get to the deeper energy pathways with the Aleph-Tah body system, a lot of times you'll see these pathways cross the midline. Sometimes they cross 1 or 2 times. Sometimes they go as far as the big toe all the way up into the brain. They're very thorough. So there's a unique difference between these pathways and these points versus acupuncture. So it's very interesting. So now when we get in the Aleph-Tah body, to make this understandable to people, we have to talk about what are the main parts. Well, the main way to think of ATB, Aleph-Tah body, is there's three main categories you can put everything in. And if you can think in your mind, these are your three file cabinets that you want to put everything into. You're either talking about an energy control point, you're talking about a pathway, or you're talking about a cycle. And everything can be put in one of those three boxes. So that's just a good way for people to think about it. Cycles, points, pathways. And when we get to pathways, they get broken down into three groups of pathways. You have messenger pathways, governing pathways, and primary pathway. Okay. So now when we think of the body as a telecommunication system, what do we need in telecommunications? Well, telecommunications is the science and practice of transmitting information by electromagnetic means. So a bioenergetic telecommunication system is a human energy system that transmits information in living systems, very similar to electromagnetic. So when we look at the three parts of the Aleph-Tau body, like on the screen, you can see you have the energy cycles, and there's 7 of them, which is interesting, 7 cycles. And then you have the energy points, those are the Hebrew letters. And then you have the energy pathways. Now, if you look on the right, you can see the cycles are like cycle modulators. So in telecommunications, modulator is something that groups all this information together and puts it together and basically forms a signal that then can be sent out as the message. And that's kind of what the cycles do in the body. They're a way to organize the body. So everything in the body gets divided into one of the 7 cycles based on its resonating frequency. So it's a way, you can almost think of it as categories.
Okay.
So it's taking all this information, modulating it, and then sending it out. And the Hebrew letters, you could think of those as command centers. So those are like your telecommunication command centers. And that's that broadcasting command center, like we're broadcasting from here. That would be one command center, and each Hebrew letter on the body is like that. And then you have the pathways. Well, the messenger pathways, there's 12 of them, 12 messenger pathways. They are the broadcasting channels. So that's what broadcasts everything out throughout the body. And then there's governing pathways, and there's 3-in-1 governing pathways. And what they do is they govern and supervise the systems of the body. And then there's a 2-in-1 primary pathway, which what I mean by that is it's technically one pathway that divides into 2 and then comes back together as 1. Really interesting, because we have that principle all throughout Scripture of the 1 dividing into 2 coming back to 1. And that's what the primary pathway does. And all of these systems together make up this bioenergetic telecommunication system.
When Yeshua laid hands on people to heal them, what exactly was he doing? Could it be that he was employing an ancient healing practice long since forgotten? And what if you could do the same thing today to stop a heart attack, bleeding, an allergic reaction, even choking?
But we've had people who were bitten by a poisonous snake, and they did this application, and when they moved their hands, all the poison and the stuff was just sitting at the top of the skin, and they just wipe it off.
How to Heal with Your Bare Hands with Dr. Alfonso Manzo shows us step by step how to use the Hebrew alphabet to correlate touch points on the body that unlock seemingly miraculous healing capabilities. This teaching is not for sale, and it's not available anywhere online. Instead, we'd like to give you this teaching as a thank you gift for donating to A Rood Awakening International. When you donate $50 as a love gift in January, you'll get How to Heal with Your Bare Hands with Dr. Alfonso Manzo on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming on the michaelrood.tv app. Donate $100 and you'll get How to Heal with Your Bare Hands, plus a blue marble glass mezuzah with elegant gold accents and a scripture scroll to put inside. Donate $300 and you'll get How to Heal with Your Bare Hands, the blue marble glass mezuzah, and a natural wood 3-dimensional plaque featuring the menorah, the word shalom in both Hebrew and English, and a message of blessing from A Rood Awakening on the back. These gifts are a limited time offer from Michael Rood to thank you for your support. Make your donation today and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. Thank you. When you donate to receive the love gift, you ensure that these teachings keep coming from A Rood Awakening International. Use your smartphone to scan the QR code on your screen to donate now and receive these limited time gifts. Or call 888-766-3610. Or get your gifts online with a donation at monthlylovegift.com.
So in essence, each command letter, Hebrew letter, contains the human code and broadcasts it through the body for proper functioning of all organ systems. It even contains the information of the DNA. Think of it this way. They are the backup system in case information gets corrupted. So if things get corrupted on a physical level, energetically, there's a backup system that's directly connected to our Creator that actually contains the original information. And if you can get the DNA reading the original information again, it can start making it. And that's why the whole field today of epigenetics is so popular. Now, above the genes. So now they're finding out the genes is like this super antenna, right? And it's like a transceiver, which means it can transmit and receive. So it's sending and receiving information, but a lot of these physicists and scientists, mainly from Russia, have now discovered that the DNA itself really doesn't contain all the information. It's just a memory bank and an antenna, and it pulls in all this information and modulates it and sorts it, and then puts it into physical action of actually manifesting this temple that we have. The only problem they have is they can't figure out where the information is actually coming from. But we know the answer to that.
Right.
And I would suggest it's the information coming from the Creator, working through the Aleph Tav body points, and then we get this temple.
And I think we've mentioned this before. So this is why, you know, a few years ago, there was the hubbub about vaccines that had the mRNA technology. RNA tells DNA what to do, correct?
Yes.
So if there's messenger RNA coming from a man-made artificial source, that's going to interfere with the God source of RNA that is telling our DNA what to do.
Yeah, and some of the, maybe we can get a link to this video if people want to go see it, but in some of this interesting research out of Russia, they were even transferring information from one species to another. And they found that all they needed was the information of the DNA, the gene, and they would transfer that information through laser light onto another animal, and they started developing the characteristics of the other animal. They actually started changing their DNA just by using frequency information carried by laser light.
Wow. Not even like injecting anything.
Not even injecting it.
So this is akin to, we've mentioned Star Trek before and science fiction. So this is like when we see things on these space movies where in the future doctors will not have a needle, they'll just have a light that goes boop, and that's the same as getting a vaccination for something. That is quite plausible.
That is.
Even with today's technology that we have that you just spoke about.
Right.
Wow.
So that brings back the idea of how easy is it to reprogram our DNA? And how have they been doing it already? So, and another thing to think about here is only when these points are resonating correctly in phase coherence are the pathways, then the pathways are, and the pathways are circulating correctly. So you want the points resonating correctly in phase coherent and the energy pathways circulating correctly. Can they recreate the proper chemistry, the proper cells, the proper tissues? So this leads us to our lifestyle and how we live things out. Because based on how we're living, we're going to start affecting these points. And we're probably going to get more into that on the next episode.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then that's going to dictate how the body is actually functioning.
And this would be what you were speaking of. This is a good example of epigenetics. That is that which is above genetics. So genetics, yeah, they determine some things, but how you live turns the expression of those genes on or off.
On and off, yes. So the more we're looking at genes, they're almost like there's like a skeletal structure of the genes, and then they have to download this information and then figure out how to process that information. And then that information is like turning on the fuses of the skeletal structure. And when that fuse gets turned off, well, then you might have dysfunction. If it gets turned back on, all of a sudden that system's functioning again. So it's very interesting what we're finding out about epigenetics. And then, like you said, it comes down to a lot to our lifestyle. How are we living? How are we thinking? Our mental emotional aspect.
I tell people all the time.
Faith.
Yeah, exactly. I tell people all the time, it's like your genes or your genetic weaknesses, whatever they may be, and we do have genetic weaknesses, everybody has different ones. It's like a grenade sitting in the corner of your living room, but the pin is still in it. Unless you pull that pin, is it really a threat? Well, no.
Right.
It's dangerous, but only when you pull that pin through your actions and lifestyle will that grenade go off or not.
Exactly. And so a lot of what I think we call genetic is really just learned behavior. You get the same problems as your parents because you were taught to live how they lived.
You were passed down bad habits, not bad genes.
That's right. So if you change things, then all of a sudden that gene expression doesn't get turned on or turned off, and now you don't have the problem. So here's a common screen or PowerPoint slide on the screen here now that I've shown many times, but to reiterate that the breath of life comes from the Creator, and then that starts creating this informational level on the body, which is controlled by the Hebrew letters. It's the telecommunication center. And when all those systems are working together in phase coherence, like a big old giant electromagnetic telecommunication system, then that is what starts producing your chemistry. And then the chemistry produces your cells, and then the cells produce your tissues. And I don't know, most people have probably heard this, and we've heard it all our training, that almost every 7 years your body is growing a new one, right? So we know every type of tissue and cell in our body has a different lifespan, and then it dies and it makes a new one. So you literally have a new body every 7 years. I think it's interesting it's every 7 years. There's that cycles of 7 again that
Right.
we're gonna see throughout Scripture.
Yep.
So what happens if you're giving the body the proper information and the proper lifestyle for those 7 years? Well, your body's gonna be able to reproduce a good, healthy body. And if you're giving it bad information and bad lifestyle, well, you're gonna start the aging process, right? It's like, oh, what happened to that person since the last time I saw him? It's like, well, what happened?
And that ties into the whole, forgiveness cycle as well, right? You can keep going down the wrong path, but the minute you start doing things right, you can go the other way. You can repent. So you can have your body repent, as it were, because your cells are regenerating every minute, every second of every day. And as soon as you put in better foods and better lifestyle, you're creating better cells, which then create a better life. And so
That's right.
it all ties together.
And a lot of people call that anti-aging, or reversing aging. Well, yeah, you're gonna look better because you're developing new healthy cells instead of bad corrupted cells. And that's the aging process. So now on this slide, we have the Hebrew electromagnetic temple. It's just kind of a summary. Everything in the body is controlled by energy points or pathways, is an and or. These points are Hebrew letters and related to biblical principles. The body works based on laws of physics and mathematics. So our body is our temple, and it works based on all of Yah's laws. I call this the universal Torah, everything that he spoke. Some obviously he wrote down in his word, and we have from that. And there's other things that we've discovered in the laws of physics, like gravity and whatever, electromagnetism and all these different things that we've discovered. So the human temple functions based on Hebrew energy points that are related to his word and his Torah. They are mathematical, and they function like telecommunication systems in the body, sending messages throughout the body for the proper manifestation and function of the human temple. Their function and meaning are like thematic interpretation, drawing a correlation between the meaning of the energy point, in other words, the Hebrew letter, and the biblical meaning. So I don't know if you've ever seen some of the work and thematic interpretation. I'm trying to think of his name, Tony Robinson. Is it Robinson or Robinson?
Tony Robbins is the is the motivational speaker.
I'm sorry, Tony.
Tony Robinson. Yes, Tony Robinson, Torah teacher. Yep.
Yeah, Restoration of Torah, I think is his ministry. And he does the thematic interpretation where you look at the themes in the Bible and how they point to
things. That's him. That's Tony Robinson stuff.
Yep, very fascinating, and you'll find out that the Hebrew letters are like that in the body. When you look at the meaning of a Hebrew letter, and then you look at the meanings of what that point controls in the body, it has a very similar thematic meaning.
Okay,
it's like, well, how can that be?
Well, let's take an example of that. Just take a little side road here. So, very first letter, Aleph.
Aleph.
So Aleph is the bull, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what does that picture tell us?
So Aleph is a picture of the bull, and so it means like first. It can mean creator, source, strong, and in biblical times, obviously they used the ox to pull things and to do movement and plowing the fields and everything. So the ox was the mover, the force they were using to accomplish things. But the Aleph is also the silent letter in Hebrew. And since it's the first letter, it's often the letter that illustrates or represents the Creator himself, who is silent, and you see him by the work of his hands, of what he's created. So we can see him by the creation, but he's mainly silent. We don't audibly hear him all the time speaking to us. But he's the first creator. He's the first source. So that's what that letter represents. And in the body, that letter controls movement. Any and all forms of movement in the body are controlled by that letter. So a little bit later, we're going to show you a PowerPoint slide of where that point is on the body and some more information about it. And you're going to see that that point is directly related to movement, and the first movement or the first creation of the body. So a direct correlation between the letter and the point, and it's going to be really significant in where it is on the body when we get there.
You know, that Hebrew, those of us who know Hebrew, I know that there's a Paleo Hebrew and that type of thing. Yep. We look beyond what we have in modern times. Yep. We understand that they were all, pictures. Yes. But, what you're speaking of there, it's almost like how if people didn't know we were talking about Hebrew, they'd say, oh, you're talking about Japanese or something like that, where there's this same meaning and themes and symbols all behind the one letter and how it is to be interpreted when it's used as in a word. And that just sort of gives the word a feeling or a sense or there's a whole sentence behind the one word using that letter.
Yes. And I think that's why I try to stay out of the debates, because a lot of people say all that ancient pictographic Hebrew is made up stuff. And it's like, well, we have tablets and things that we found.
There's stuff called archaeology.
Archaeology, we found digs. And then some people, the modern is all bad, and only the ancient stuff is good. But I think this is more of the 2-in-1 again. And we see the 2-in-1, we're gonna see it here in a little bit with a primary pathway. But we see it with the creation of man. He created man first, he took woman out of man, and then so there's one divided into two, and then the two come back together and create another. And I think the Hebrew language is like that. You have the two sticks, one stick, they're separated, the two come back together. I think Hebrew is the same way. I think there was the Hebrew language at the beginning, and then somewhere during the time of Daniel, when they were in Babylon, I think Daniel was told to change the language, to conceal things and kind of hide the meaning. And now all of a sudden, now that we're in the end times, all of a sudden there's this resurrection of the ancient form and the modern form, and when you put those together, I think you see the full picture of what the Hebrew language is really about. So I don't think we should be fighting about which one's right. I think they're both right, and we should be putting them together.
That's a good concept. I like that.
Right? So now we're going to get more into spiritual warfare and how that works with legality. So we're talking about how the Hebrew letters are on the body. Therefore, how we live is directly correlated to how each point functions, and thus how the temple will ultimately function. It is built upon the universal legal system that Yah created and put into effect. So I have here in this PowerPoint slide, you see that spiritual warfare is based on a legal system, right? Blessings and curses are based on a legal system. The ancient Near Eastern covenants were built on a legal system. Physics has a legal system. We know these laws of physics, things you don't want to do. You don't climb up a 100,000-foot building and jump off thinking you're Superman. You're gonna splat on the ground, and you're not gonna violate physics. Physics wins in the end. So we find out that the law wins in the end, and whose law? And then your temple now is based on a legal system. And I don't know if a lot of people realize that. It's like, well, how's that? So Torah is the legal system, not just the biblical Torah, but all the instructions that Yah spoke forth when he created the world. Some he gave us in his word, we call that the Torah. Others we have discovered when we seek out things, just seek out truth throughout nature, we call it the laws of physics. And now what we're discovering is the temple, the body itself works based on a legal system, based on everything Yah has created. And I call that system the Aleph Tav body system, which is literally made up of the Hebrew letters themselves, his word. So on this screen, you can actually see all the points listed, and they're color-coded by the different cycles, have different colors. And there's all the points, and they have the number, and then the ancient Hebrew and the modern Hebrew.
Okay, so people should pause on this slide for a while.
And look at that. Now, what I want people to point out here is there's 26 energy points. And the number is based on the operating frequency. And that's what I discovered. So when I first found out about this system and how it came from Japan, I was intrigued by why, and if you look at the slide, the points are pretty random. You see the 1, or the Aleph, is in the knee, and then the Bet's on the back, and then Gimel, which is number 3, is all the way up, and then the 4 is up there, and then the 5 is back down on the legs. It's random. It's like, why didn't you just put these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Well, what we found out is they weren't numbered, they were identified. A number 1 is a number 1 because its vibrational frequency is in the 1 range. It's 1 terahertz.
Oh,
The
okay.
2 has a 2 terahertz vibrational frequency range. So the number really is its operating frequency.
Okay.
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 So there's only 26 points, and obviously in Hebrew there's 22 letters, but you have 5 final forms. And
Okay.
that makes 27 points.
Right. So why are there only 26?
Yeah, and there's 1 inactive point, 27, which we're gonna get to in 1 minute.
Okay.
And each point is related to a Hebrew letter and a number because of its frequency. And each one has a name which correlates to the meaning of that point. So collectively, we would call these life formation messengers. So
Okay.
all of them collectively are called life formation messengers. So that word there, malach, like angel, these are messengers for the formation of life.
Okay. Makes sense.
Hebrew is backwards.
Yep.
To us.
Well, and that's what messenger RNA is.
Yes.
It tells the DNA how to make life, right? That's what
Right.
DNA is, the building block of life. So they've got to have a message to tell you. Now, 1 second, so the 27, just go back there for a second,
Yep.
if you would. So when you say it's inactive, so there's a point there, obviously, through the dermis of the skin, we can see that. It just doesn't do anything right now? Is that what,
It does very little.
okay.
It's not fully active.
Okay.
So there's still a lot to be known about what does this point really do in controlling the body. And the other interesting thing is names. This would probably require a whole hour teaching in itself on
Okay.
how we can test things in the body for names, but it's a long process using frequency and everything. But the best way I can think of a name is actually a Messianic Jew who was a chiropractor, friend of mine in Texas. Dr. Joe B. Young, which is a really cool name for a chiropractor. And
Dr. B. Young. Yeah.
yeah, and he wrote some really interesting books on Yeshua, and I wouldn't call it the Bible code, as most people are familiar with Bible code, but more of looking at codes in the Bible with the Hebrew language in mind. Not this like random searching letters and numbers, but it's a whole different concept of his. But he used to always teach this concept on names, are nice. It's an acronym. So I picked up on that, and I have this in my book a lot. So that stands for nice, nature, identity, character, and essence. So when you think of a name in Hebrew, a name is your nature, your identity, your character, and essence. And this is why when people were named in the Bible and they had an encounter and their nature and identity was changed, there was a name change. Because in Hebrew, language is very important and words mean things. And so when a person's name is changed, it's like their nature, their identity, their character, and their essence changes. So everything in nature is actually named. And so when you're doing things with testing the body energetically or with like muscle testing, a lot of times you have to identify the name that it was given in creation, that the Father gave to it, because that's what the body understands. So there's a whole long process of figuring that out. But each point has that. Now, when you get to this final point here, you can see on the screen, you can see on the left side there is the final Zadi. So Zadi is one of the Hebrew letters, and then you have the 5 final forms. They call it Sophit letters. Now, these letters are one of the original 5 letters, but they take a different shape and a different meaning and a different numerical value when they're usually at like an end of almost like how we would use that period at an end of a sentence. So at the end of a thought, a lot of times the last Hebrew letter will be a final form letter that kind of lets you know, okay, this is the end of a thought process. And so 5 of those letters have a final form. So on the right side there is the final Zadi. Now the normal Zadi, which you do have a point for, it's point 18 on the body, they say that is the righteous man. This is the Hebrew letter Zadikah, or Zadi. It means, where we get the Hebrew word Zadikah, righteousness. right? That's where that word comes from. And so you can see the one on the left, that is the righteous man, they say humbly praying, so his knees are bent, and he's in kind of prayer, with his knees bent, praying. And then the one on the right, they say is the final Zadi, and they call that the righteous resurrected man. So that's really interesting.
Okay. So the first one is, so 18 is righteous man, and the final Zadi is righteous resurrected man.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that final one would be point 27, and that would be the one point that's not active on the body. So when I was going down through the Hebrew letters and seeing if they would match up to all of these, you know, I almost got tricked after I got done with 22, because I was like, oh, I'm out of Hebrew letters. And then I was like, oh, wait, you have the 5 final forms. Maybe this would still work.
Right.
And the meanings continue to still work. And then I got to the last final form, number 27, which would be the final Zadi, and I was like, oh, well, we don't have a point for this. And then I found out, well, we do have points, they're just not active. And then I found out, well, this point means a resurrected righteous man. And I'm like, oh, we don't have a point for a resurrected body? Because we're not resurrected yet. So this only makes sense.
Okay, hang on, slow down. So, okay, slow down. So it's inactive because we're not there yet.
That's right.
No, we're not resurrected yet.
Yep.
So the point is ready, and it's ready for us. It's already pre-prepared for us.
Yep.
But we're not there yet, so
Yep.
it doesn't do anything yet.
Yeah, so when the final righteous resurrected man returns, what's going to happen? Does he reactivate this point? And now I can't prove this part, but my theory is that maybe this point was on until Adam and Eve sinned, and then it got turned off. I don't know. I can't prove it. I can't disprove it. I guess it's just
Wow.
checkmate until he returns, and then maybe we'll find out.
With that in mind, do you know if it's possible for any of the other points to be turned on or off? Or are they just on all the time?
They seem like they're on all the time.
Okay.
But they get congested.
Okay.
And as they're congested and they're not broadcasting correctly, then that's when health issues arise.
Okay. All right, newsflash, big tech does not want you to hear the truth, but we do. That's why we have the MichaelRood.tv app. You see, they don't control what goes on the app, we do. That's why we can put stuff on there that wouldn't survive a day on YouTube or suddenly disappear from Facebook. You know, that stuff. And that stuff is only on the MichaelRood.tv app. We want you to see it so bad, we'll even give it to you for free for 14 days. Try it out. Go online to MichaelRood.tv. That's MichaelRood.tv.
Now, the other thing to mention about these points is you'll notice with the arrows on the slide, we have points that are ascending energy and descending energy. Well, we have to remember what these things are called. They're messengers, so malach. So isn't it interesting, in the scriptures, we have ascending and descending messengers. And so primarily energy circulates up the back and down the front. So if the point is on the back of the body, it's ascending energy, and if it's on the front of the body, it's descending. Did I say that right? I don't know. In my mind, I said it right. I don't know if it came out right.
I think I came out right.
And then you have the 12 messenger pathways. So there's 12 of them, and they're the ones broadcasting information throughout the body. There's 12 of them. Now,
12 messengers, go figure.
Yeah, 12 messengers. Isn't that interesting? Now, this gets interesting because you start thinking of the 12 tribes, right? And look at where these pathways begin on the slide here. You have 3 that begin in the chest, 3 in the feet, 3 in the hands, and 3 in the face. So you have 4 sets of 3. Kind of like how the tribes had to assemble around the tabernacle. You had 3 tribes in the east, 3 in the south, north, and west. So I find that very fascinating that you see some correspondence here.
And I'll bet if we looked at the characteristics of each one of the tribes, it would probably go even deeper than this, and that they would, ascending and descending, what their jobs were and all this. I bet it would all correlate.
Oh yeah, I've had some people kind of working on that, and they're seeing some of the correlations. They know about the tribes and even the ancient pictographic, I guess you could say the symbol that tribe had.
Yeah, their logo, if you will.
Yeah, their logo or their symbol. And it's like, well, how does that kind of correlate to the different pathways?
Oh my gosh.
And of course, these pathways are responsible for carrying the information throughout the body from the Hebrew letters. The next thing here is the cycles. So you have 7 cycles, and the best way to think of cycles are they literally are cycles, but they're also, you can think of them as categories. So everything in the body is going to be divided into one of these 7 cycles based on its resonating frequency.
Okay.
And so each cycle is going to have its own musical notes that are related to it, its own colors, because they're going to be in different spectrums of frequency. And what's interesting is the first 5 are very physical. And what's interesting is 5 is the number of grace. It's kind of like the number of flesh. We have the 5 physical senses. And you can start to see how these 7 cycles also represent the 7 colors of the rainbow. So you have your yellow, orange, green, blue, and red in the first 5 cycles. Now when we get to cycle 6, that's the level of the body that is more related to the spirit. A little bit to the soul, but more of the spirit. And we're told that 6 is the number of man, and you have to wonder, is that speaking of spiritual man? So in 6th cycle, you have also the 3 governing pathways. So in each one of these first 6 cycles, you have 2 messenger pathways.
Okay.
And so many of the Hebrew letters. Now they're not equal, and that's what's on the slide. Like first cycle has 1 through 4, so the Aleph through the Dalet. Now second cycle goes from the Hey all the way to the Samech, 5 through 15. So they're not always equally. Just like 4th cycle, there's only 1 Hebrew letter in 4th cycle. Although 4th cycle is very important because each one of these cycles is going to be related to a different mental emotional state of the body. Okay, and then when you get to 7th cycle is like the light. That's Yeshua. That's the light of the body that holds everything together. We would call that the primary pathway. And the primary pathway is like the breath of life, the breath of light. And it's related to everything, but it holds everything together. So you can see these cycles of 7 then relate to the 7 Moedim and the 7 spirits of Yah and the 7 fruits of the spirit. And you have the menorah with the 7 candlesticks. And 7th cycle is kind of like the first one that everything branches off of.
This is a gigantic rabbit hole.
Yes.
My goodness.
So the symbolism of how the body is designed here, not just representing the tabernacle itself and articles in the tabernacle, because there were even 7 articles of the tabernacle, but down to even the numerical meanings that we find in Scripture. 5 being the number of grace, and 6 being spiritual man, and 7 being perfection.
Goodness.
Right? So now on the screen you can see the breath of life and the breath of light primary pathway. So it actually begins right in the belly button. And if your hands were raised, it would kind of form this figure 8. And it's flowing up the arm one way and then down the arm on the opposite, which then creates the polarities. And the same thing in the feet. So the feet are actually opposite of the hand.
So this is where you're saying this differs from meridians that do not cross the center line. These obviously do.
Yes. And it's deep. And you almost see the 2 colors here on the picture, the white and the purple. That's kind of the separation of the breath of life and the breath of light. You actually have both words there. And in Scripture, actually, when it talks about him breathing in the breath of life, the actual translation should be breath of lives. It's actually plural. It's more than 1. And we don't really translate it that way because people are always kind of like, well, what does that mean? Maybe because there's this separation of this 2 and 1 here. Now, in the next one, we have the next following slide, just examples. So here's back to the Hebrew letter, and we kind of covered this, the Aleph. So you can see it means ox, and it's actually a picture of an ox. And that's why it's an ox. The Hebrew word Aleph literally means ox, and it's a picture of an ox. It's the silent letter, so it refers to creation, the creator. And look at all the things that it controls in the body. They're all in the middle there in the purple. Anything to do with movement, help letting go, flexibility, elimination projects, breathing, circulation, the lymph. So all of these concepts are concepts of something needs to move. And where is it located? Well, it's located on the inside of the knee. So what is the first thing you have to do if you want to move and not look like a robot?
You got to bend the knee.
You have to bend your knee. And if the Aleph represents the creator, who do we bend our knees to? So there's a spiritual meaning to this point.
Got it.
Who do you bend your knee to? And the idea of, are you stuck in life? What's not moving? So you have to start thinking, do you have an Aleph problem? And how do you work on this point? Well, it's very simple. Your left hand would go to the opposite right on the inside of the knee, and then you would cross your hand the other way, and you're just touching opposite knees on the inside, and you hold it for 5 minutes, and that's going to help this Hebrew point.
Now we're going to do more of this in the love gift, but just so real basic, and we talked about this when the cameras were off. If you're going to do that, you need to have more natural type fabric on, ideally, so cotton or linen, something like that. Okay, and it works through.
It works right through your clothes.
Through clothes, or you could wear shorts and do that way with this particular one, right? And just touch it for
Does it matter? 5 minutes.
After 5 minutes, now does it matter which parts of your fingers?
I try to keep my fingers together and focus on the middle finger touching the center of that point.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. Okay, good.
And you can't really miss because you have like a 5-inch diameter of effective range, which is really pretty large. So you almost can't miss.
Okay.
So as long as you're within that 5-inch diameter.
So it's almost like that aura, so to speak, that we talked about, the heart giving off 10 feet of its radiance. It's same thing here. You do have some leeway to.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So is that, just by the way, is that more precise or less precise than, say, I would assume it's less precise than, say, an acupuncture point? Are those very, very specific?
Those are really, really specific.
Okay.
And we're not sure if they're really specific just because of the energy point or because you're using a needle.
Okay.
So with a needle, it's a little bit more force stimulation.
Versus,
Whereas with this, it's just touch.
Okay.
And there's a resonance there. So as long as you're close, almost like tuning forks.
Right.
If you hit one and then you bring another one, the common tune, where they will start resonating, and that doesn't have to be very close.
Okay, got it. Or like the example I gave in a previous episode where I'm coming close to a car in a very dry area, that I would get a 4 or 5 inch lightning bolt between the car and my key. So there is that sort of area of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
The only other thing that I mentioned with the Aleph is this is where we get the letter A. So if you kind of turn it upside down, you can see where the A comes from.
Oh, yeah.
And you get all these A words here, like author, architect, the artist. So these are all these concepts of the first creator or the person who's making the plans. And you see what they've done by what they've made, not necessarily by what they're saying.
Right.
So,
or an archway, the entrance to something. So, yeah. Okay.
So the next example, I think we have 3 more, is a 13. This is the mem. So the mem in Hebrew kind of looks like this picture of water. It means water, but it can mean water, chaos, birthing. It's like a blessing and curse. So is it the water to cleanse or the water to destroy? And of course, it has a lot to do with multiplication and reproduction because you're born in water. Birth is chaotic, but then out of that birth is a blessing. And of course, what does this point control in the body? Well, it's the top of the list for fertility and pregnancy and hormones and emotions. So you're gonna just look down the list, all the different things here, the thyroid, the adrenals, the thymus, all those type of things directly related to the 13s. So this is a top of the list for anything emotional, top of the list for anything with the reproductive system or the endocrine system, which is your hormones.
Okay, so very important for people who have, because obviously emotions are, right now in this day and age, everybody's worried about something or whatever, and there's obviously a lot of interference going on with all the frequencies we have around in our body and with what's going on in us. So how do we address this one? How does that one work?
Now this one, you just touch same side. So basically you find where the nipple normally would be.
Okay.
And then if you come up about an inch, right about in here in the middle of the chest is gonna be the 13. So you just lightly touch both sides, left
so
and
you
left,
don't
right,
have,
right.
You don't have to push down.
You don't have to push down, you don't have to rub, and hold for about 5 minutes, try to get nice and relaxed and just hold those points. You might feel pulses, you might not, but that's gonna help.
Now the pulses, as when we were talking about this on the phone, before we ever started this, you told me that the pulses are not necessarily your heart, well they aren't, your heart.
They're energetic pulses.
All right, so if
you
you
have one for each of the 7 cycles.
Okay.
So they're gonna change and they're gonna feel different.
Ooh. So if you feel something, it's not a muscle twitch. It's a cycle, and it's different and at a different rate than your heartbeat.
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
And gurgles and jerks and shakes and twitches and stuff. That's your body realigning itself and correcting things.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Now you can do this lying down if you feel more comfortable. If you can't hold your arms up or whatever.
Yeah. You get pillows and things to prop your hands and try to get as much relaxed as you can.
Okay.
Yep. The next one is the 12. So that's the Lamed. And the name of this one is Wheel of Authority. And the Lamed is a picture of a shepherd's staff, and that's what it means, or cattle goad. And so staff, rod, and the concept of this is like the shepherd or the teacher, the leader. It's what navigates. And in fact, Lamed is often used as a prefix in front of words, meaning towards or to, because it's the shepherd is navigating and leading to or towards the sheep. And so that's why it oftentimes is called the rudder or the tongue, or that's the guide or the steer, what's navigating and directing something. And it's right on the center of the neck. So if you find your earlobe and you come right down about to where the bottom of your jaw is, right about there, is a 12. It's almost going to be on C4.
So almost right by the jugular, kind of?
Yeah, and almost like on that sternocleidomastoid muscle right here that comes down across. And what is it related to? Well, it's related to stubbornness, willfulness, rebellion, neck issues, criminal behavior, pain in the butt. But a spiritual meaning is stiff-necked. So remember, the energy is coming up the back, down the front. So the energy is coming up, and then it has to go through this point. And if this point starts getting congested because you're willful or rebellious, then your neck becomes really stiff, and then you become more dull of the mind, and you become stiff-necked, and you run around the desert for 40 years because you're lost.
Oh my goodness.
So you can see that. Wow. And if you're really a pain in the butt, he gives you a pain in the butt because this point can cause sciatica.
I love it.
So how do? You just simply touch both sides of your neck and just...
Both sides?
Yep.
Okay, so this
left and left, right and right, and just get nice and comfortable. And
okay.
That's what you do for the 12.
Oh my goodness.
And the last one is the Tav. And so that's the Tav. It means a sign or a mark, and it's right underneath the collarbone on both sides. And since it's a sign or a mark or a signature, or like X marks the spot, that's where we got X marks the spot. It's a picture of like an X or a cross. And so this point is an interesting point because most pathways cross right here at this point, and its specialty is helping the body to adjust to different environments. So it's kind of like completeness in all areas of life and helping to adjust. And that's another meaning of the point, is a sign or mark is complete, right? It's the end goal. And so this is going to help anything with allergies, asthma, lymph, again, the thyroid, parathyroid, anything in this area of the body is going to be helped with this. Stroke prevention, light functions. And so the spiritual meaning to this one is, how are we living in the light? Do we have completeness in our life? And how are we reacting to our environments? So anytime you need to change environment and you're not adapting, when you're traveling, working on the Tav. And it's simple. You're just going to touch both sides underneath the collarbone.
So this is just above what we were touching before. Which letter was that again? This one was?
This is the mem.
The mem, so it's above the mem.
And you find your collarbone right here, and then right underneath that collarbone, on the, if you draw a line straight up from the nipple usually, to the collarbone, right underneath that collarbone is the 22, or the Tav. So you're just lightly touching those 2 points. And that's the bioenergetic Hebrew temple.
Oh my goodness. And that's just scratching the surface, because you just covered a few letters, and then we have, there's more letters, but then do we form actual words by touching this one, then that one, then this one? Wow.
You can.
Okay. And I'm sure that all correlates to what the person is going through?
Yes, and what you want to correct.
Wow, this is a giant rabbit hole. Okay, this is really great. I love this. Can we do one more?
Yes.
Okay, and then we've got a love gift. I believe it is this month as well. So that's going to explain some emergency.
Yeah, touch points.
Emergency touch points. Ooh, okay.
Stopping heart attacks in progress.
What?
Burns and bleeding and food poisoning and anaphylactic shock, all kinds of things.
See, this would be great to have. See, my dad died of a heart attack 4 years ago. And my mom tried to save him, and they always had the CPR instructions on the side of the fridge, just in case something happened to one of them. They were in their 80s. Mom tried her best, and they always made sure they knew that. This is something people need to have on the side of their fridge to stop a heart attack, and because it didn't work for my dad. He's not with us any longer. So this would be helpful for spouses to have for each other in case something crazy happens.
And you don't need any fancy technology. You just have to know where to place your hands and have a set of hands.
Wow. And this actually works. We have
And it
like
has.
testimonies of people that this works.
For years.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So again, that's the love gift. What you've learned today is just scratching the surface. We have more next week. We're going to conclude this series. So as you can tell, today went a little bit long. If next week goes a little long, who cares? Stay with us. This is important stuff. This is absolutely mind-blowing stuff I've never heard before. Likely you haven't heard of this either. So again, we're going to teach you what to do, and Dr. Monzo is going to show you next week how you can learn this. Maybe you can do a class with him. Yes, you can do that type of thing. So anyway, have a great week. Until then, Shavua Tov. We'll see you next week.
Whenever and wherever you are watching this broadcast, it represents hundreds of man-hours of production and post-production, and then it goes out to the world in several different languages. Why is this possible? It's because people like you support this ministry. We do our best to get this out freely to the entire world. Freely you have received. Now, this is your opportunity to do as Yeshua said, and freely give. Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon, and I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.